Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you're doing well. Hope your dog days of summer are going well and that you've had a great one. I've gotten a lot of requests lately to do an update on the room here that I have all my amphibians, mainly salamanders as you know. I have some frogs, so don't know if I can call it a salamander room, but who cares? So what I want to do is walk you through each one of the tanks. I'm going to do a lot less narrating this time, a lot more showing. And if the animals are out, great. If not, I'm sorry. Hopefully, I kind of think I may have gotten all of them, but there may be one or two species that I just wasn't able to. Most of them are nocturnal, and it's just really difficult to try to film them, and I really don't want to tear the enclosures apart. But anyways, my room is full. There is one empty tank, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to put in it yet, but it'll likely be a salamander species as usual. I do have a couple of salamanders right now that I haven't really designated. They're in little grow out bins until they can get a little bit bigger, and then I will probably figure out what I'm going to do with them. So with that, let's get to it and let's take a look at these tanks. All right, so let's kick it off with the northern red salamander, Pseudotriton ruber, one of my favorites, so that's why I'm starting there. This is the setup. It is a 20-gallon tall. Mentioned this in prior videos. And it used to be a drip ball, but that was just creating too much cyanobacteria. In fact, I am pretty much completely done with drip balls at this point. So anyways, just a lot of moss, some creeping fig, and liverworts in here, and the salamander, and then some sphagnum moss, excuse me. So that's about it. Take a look. Hope you enjoy. Next up are my black chin red salamanders. They are in this 40-gallon breeder. This also used to be a drip wall, but I transformed it into what you see now. There was too much cyanobacteria. Actually, I still have a little bit of cyanobacteria. I really can't believe it, but yeah, it's an amano shrimp, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's clean, as you can see. I do a little bit of water changes or blackworms. There's two terrestrial salamanders. When I say terrestrial, two of them have morphed. One of them is refusing to morph, and I'm not sure why. It may be neotonic, or I don't even know if this species does that, but I've got some nerites and some monos, as I mentioned, and lots of mosses and liverworts and creeping fig. This is the salamander in question that will not change, and he's the biggest one. He just will not change, so I don't know if he ever will, but he's living his best life up in here. So anyways, enjoy the rest of this one. Hey, real quick, this is the lid. Some people ask me, it's all glass, and then I have this plastic thing in the front with ventilation holes drilled. And I also have this little, it's like a computer fan almost. I'm not really sure. I bought it on Amazon, like 20 bucks or something. And I have it on a low setting, and it puts enough airflow in there to keep it from getting too moist because it gets pretty humid in there because of the water. So anyways, just thought I'd mention that. Next up, we've got my cave salamanders. They are in a 40-gallon breeder powered by a canister filter. And the background was made out of styrofoam, Drylock, and Quikrete. You can see the video on how I made these. There's just some mosses and liverworts in here pretty much, and a couple plants in the water, dwarf sage. And there are 4 cave salamanders in here. These are really, really interesting animals to watch eat. They are ravenous. They will come out and attack the food, whether it's a fruit fly or small crickets, within literally less than 30 seconds, and they're really quick. So anyhow, hope you enjoy. These are some of my favorites. This is the greater siren setup. It is a 150-gallon aquarium powered by several large canister filters. As you can see, it is way overgrown with dwarf sage and some other plants that the name is escaping me. There's anubias, there's a lot of mosses, including Christmas moss and Java moss and flame moss. But this one is huge. I do almost a full water change every 2 weeks, sometimes less, to keep the water clear. I've had some issues with some brown algae, which is diatoms really, so it's kind of a pain, but you got to keep up with your water changes. And these sirens are massive. They are almost 2 feet long each. When I got them, they were probably about a foot. It's been about a year and a half. So love watching these grow and enjoy watching them. This is my Blotch Tiger Salamander enclosure. It is 75-gallon and it is a vivarium. There's no water features. It is powered by a Mist King to keep it moist. And there are 2 large Blotch Tiger Salamanders in here. There is moss, grasses, golden pothos, liverworts, and like I said, there's moss, but there's multiple kinds of moss. Thread moss, fern moss, pincushion moss, you name it. There's all kinds of moss growing in here. This is was one of my first setups, and it's probably the most established. As you can see, there is one of the salamanders. I had them since they were larvae, and sorry for the glare, but the root structure and everything is really solid in here. I mean, the substrate is really high quality. There's lots of microfauna in here, including isopods and springtails, amongst other things. So one of my favorite setups, and the salamanders these are like Muppets, so really fun to watch these guys. Moving from the blotched to the barred tiger salamanders, there are two in here. This one does have a water feature because that salamander right there in the frame is the one that loves the water, and so I did not want to deprive him of that. So this is a pretty simple setup in a 40-gallon breeder. It is mosses, liverworts, ferns. On the land, some creeping fig. Again, moss, liverworts everywhere in this. And then in the water, there's some Java fern, Java moss, and some Anubias. Let's move on to the Eastern Newt tank. This is a 40-gallon paludarium. It is essentially run with duckweed and golden pothos, but I'm really starting to like the look. It has two little islands on it, and there are 4 Eastern Newts in here. Just did a water change, so it's nice and clean, and that is where the water, the return for the filter comes out, kind of like a drip, but only in the center, which moves the water and creates some aeration. As you can see, there's some newts over here. And this is also an older enclosure for me, so hope you enjoy this and give the newts some props. And next we have the green frog tank. This is a paludarium in a 40-gallon breeder, powered by a strong external canister filter. There are 2 green frogs in here that I've had since tadpoles. Unfortunately, one passed away. I don't know if it had spinally leg syndrome. I'm not really sure what it was, but the tadpole always swam sideways, and I tried to nurse it for as long as I could, and eventually it just passed away. It was just beyond my care. I consulted with a vet, and they were kind of clueless, to be honest, so it was unfortunate, but these 2 seem to be doing fairly well. Again, I got these as tadpoles, and I tried to make it as realistic as possible with debris and things like that on the bottom. So this also has duckweed and some sweetgrass, which are water plants that you would normally see in a pond. And there's the other frog there. And this is a really cool enclosure. I actually really like this one. It's one of my favorites, to be honest, so enjoy. Let's talk about my northern slimy salamander enclosure. This is a 40-gallon breeder. This was my first attempt at really creating outside of my tiger salamander enclosures, a forest floor, temperate forest floor for a plethodon, so a lungless salamander, but a woodland salamander. I've got some cork bark in here, lots of different creeping fig, ferns, moss, liverworts, things like that. Just about every kind of microfauna you can imagine in here is the cleanup crew as well. So I really like this one. There's some oak leaf creeping fig right there growing all over the ground. And there's a tree stump back there that I kind of foamed into the back. I actually had a problem. Most of the ferns were growing great, and then I put some, I made it more humid by putting some plastic on top, and they all started to rot, so I had to take it off. So you can't win. You can't get it humid enough for the moss, but you can't get it dry enough for the fern. So we will see what happens. But the salamanders are pretty reclusive, but I'll show you one. I know where one is. Sorry for the shaky. That's an isopod. I'm just showing you that. I don't know why. But I'll show you the salamander here in a second. This is my northern spring salamander enclosure, and the one that probably needs the most work right now. This is my last drip wall. It is kind of ending in ruin with just kind of sludge. It's just too much water, even for the liverworts and the moss. I'm gonna have to redo this one, unfortunately. I'm gonna keep this same structure in the background, but I'm gonna cut the drip wall out. I'm gonna have to stop that and create some other flow of water in there somehow, but I'm not really sure yet. But as you can see, this thing used to be lush with plants. There were some ferns and stuff that were growing, immersed from the water, and it was great. And it's just over time it just didn't work. So anyways, this is Goliath. He's back there. He's a monster. He's probably my biggest lungless salamander. He comes out at night. I'm not going to mess with him, but anyways, stay tuned for a rebuild on this and enjoy. Talking about spring salamanders, let's move up to my Carolina spring salamanders. There are 2 in here. This enclosure is actually doing really well. I redid this once in the past. You can see this build. And it is golden pothos, some creeping fig, and then there are some dwarf sage and some anubias and java moss in the water, and some moss and liverworts on the land. The 2 Carolina spring salamanders are massive. I think they are both female. I'm not 100%. I need to take some time to really sex them, but I'm pretty sure they're both female. But they are massive and always hungry. This is my 40-gallon red-legged salamander enclosure. It is a vivarium. I really like this one a lot. This is probably one of my favorite ones. These salamanders are extremely elusive. They are only out at night, so I will attempt to show you one at night here in a moment when the lights go out. But a lot of different plants have grown in here that I don't even know. They've just grown out of the moss and liverworts. There's some creeping fig, and it's really a cool enclosure. Just not enough substrate though. It was a little too damp, so some of the moss died off. I'm gonna have to add some more substrate and just give it a little bit more thickness in the substrate, because it's just not as thick as I should have made it. But salamanders seem to be doing fine anyways, and a lot of places for them to hide, so that's why you never see them. I did it like that on purpose. Yeah, that's it. This is literally one of my favorite vivariums that I've ever built. This is the massive paludarium I built for long-tailed salamanders. I've had it empty for a very long time until recently, so surprise, surprise, I am putting in 2 recently acquired long-tailed salamanders. I am gonna definitely get more though. I wanna have more than 2 in here, probably 4. But anyways, this water is pretty clear now, but it was pretty tea colored earlier. I had to stop the drip ball effect in this one too. It was just too much. A lot of moss liverworts, including Java moss. As you can see, I have the water kind of just pouring out of a hose that's coming out of that cork bark. And lots of whipworts and other types of brophytes that are growing in here. There are actually some ghost shrimp in here that are the cleanup crew in the water, and then I just have springtails on the land. And I've already put a bunch of fruit flies in here when I add the 2 salamanders. But anyways, got some Miss Kings, and this one has really done well. There's some grasses and random, I don't even know what that is. I actually think it might be stinging nettle that's growing there, so I'm just not even going to touch it. Yeah, this is a really fun one for me. I like it a lot. I've been waiting a long time to put some salamanders in here, and so let's check them out. This is my arboreal salamander enclosure. It is relatively new as compared to other enclosures I have. There's a Miss King in here. I had to rebuild it to give these salamanders more space. Unfortunately, one of them passed away, got a bacterial infection. I treated it. There was nothing I could do. Unfortunately, I tried everything. It was pretty sad, but I have two other ones in here. I'm pretty sure all three are male, so that's why I gave them this bigger enclosure so they don't bite each other, because that is why the one had bacterial infection, because of, I think, enough bite wounds that it eventually got infected. So unfortunately, it was too little too late for me with this enclosure, but anyhow, these are really interesting animals. So there's two really healthy ones in here, and they were only out at night, so I had to film this at night so you could see. This is a salamander to be determined. This was my old arboreal enclosure that I redid and called it the mossarium. As you can see, it's just really a little bit of vines and mainly cork bark and some other driftwood and moss and liverworts. That is all this is. There are no salamanders in here, although I'm thinking of putting in a salamander relatively soon. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second, but for now this one remains empty. Let's take a quick look at some of the juvenile salamanders I have in these little grow out bins here. I'm going to start with this one. This is a juvenile spring salamander. I got this not a long time ago. It was cold out and I got this salamander. This was wild collected, but it was tiny. It was about an inch. And now it is turning into a northern spring salamander, which once it's big enough, I want to introduce this to my other large spring salamander, but it's got to be at least another year until it gets to the point where it won't get eaten. And hopefully they will be opposite sexes. That'll be interesting to see if they are. If not, then I might have to keep them separated. They eat blackworms. So pretty boring container, but it does the trick. I do a water change once a week. And I have an air bubble in here, some places for them to hide. But yeah, this one's already about 4 or 5 inches long, so it's getting really big. Next, I have a baby juvenile red salamander. When I say baby, I mean it's just a juvenile, but I had this as a larva, and as you can see, this one is looking nice and bright. I was thinking of putting this in that my mossarium, but I'm not really sure what I'm going to do yet, so stay tuned. But really, really cool things to come. I appreciate all the support and hope you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for a lot more.